Now, the next reason why I think NASA could actually exist, I think another possible purpose of NASA is for military contracts and to make like a satellite network as like a surveillance satellite network. Now, there's this thing that Elon Musk came up with called Satellite, I think, where he made these satellites that cover the Earth all around with like telecommunication signals, like kind of like Wi-Fi signals, telephone signals, and all those kinds of things. And I'm kind of thinking that since mass surveillance seems to be an agenda of the U.S. government and the Illuminati as part of their plan to create a new world order, I'm kind of thinking, what if like NASA was originally created just to create a surveillance network across the whole world? Because if you think about it, right, it's kind of like, think about it like this, right? The Illuminati, the Freemasons, the people that run our countries, like the people that actually run our countries and run the UN, they've wanted to make a world government for a very long time. They've wanted to make a world government at least since the 1700s, if not earlier, depending on where you think the Freemasons and Illuminati came from. Now, they wanted to like make a world government since that time, so it's like they have a lot of things that they kind of want to think about doing, but they don't know how to accomplish. It's kind of like if you want to learn how to make a building, right, but you don't have any architecture skills, or like you want to make a city, but you only have like the resources to buy one house or something. Well, you're gonna have to like slowly buy a house, slowly buy all the properties of the city until you own the whole city, right? Well, that's what they're trying to do. So I'm kind of thinking, it's like, what if like NASA, the whole purpose of NASA, the whole time, was to go and make like a satellite network across the entire world to monitor the whole world? Like, I don't think that was the main like purpose of NASA. Like when it was first created, I think NASA was probably created for the other reasons I made, and to kind of deceive people into believing in space, or at least believing that like we're kind of pointless, that we have no purpose in life, and to believing stuff is nonsense. But I'm thinking, what if part of the reason was to kind of create a satellite network that will go across the whole world? Because if you think about it, right, it's like if you want to create a satellite that monitors the whole world, well, you got to first get that satellite in the sky. And how do you get that satellite in the sky? You get a rocket ship, and you get like a plane and all that kind of stuff. You invent all this technology to help back it up. So I think that could be another possible reason. And I also think that NASA could be a way to funnel money into military contracts, or to help like kind of create secret military projects akin to the Manhattan Project and like nuclear like weapons and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what I think like NASA's actual purposes. Second part of the video, I want to talk about like how I think NASA could have actually reasonably got this knowledge about space, because I think the way that they claim that like they got this knowledge doesn't really make sense. So yeah, to basically go over it, we're going to be going into how I believe NASA actually got the knowledge about space, and how this could explain space actually being real, but NASA like lying about it basically. We're going to talk about this interesting vision I found from a Hindu woman, this white woman, this Western woman who converted to Hinduism. And we're going to be talking about Stargates, the fake alien invasion, and reconstructing ancient technology and the Men in Black. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, in the last video, I talked about what NASA's purpose was. Basically, in the video, I summed up that they could be exploring under the sea, working on secret government projects, and like those kinds of things, going into space for reasons that we don't, under ulterior motives that we haven't been told about, looking for Nibiru, the planet Nibiru, which I think personally exists, and also going to the firmament. That's something I forgot to mention. Another idea is that they could be going up in the firmament to like leave the flat Earth firmament to get out of here as part of their spaceships. That's something that Jay Dreamers came up with, so shout out to him. We also talked about how they're going undersea and going like to do secret military operations. So to start off, with NASA's like technology and a lot of the things that we know about space, that we've been taught about space in school, university, TV, a lot of these things, people don't actually know where this actually comes from. We think that NASA invented this, and to be fair, if what they're saying is actually true, I think they actually are the ones who made the modern discoveries of these like kind of things, like UFOs and all those kind of things. But most people don't know is the fact that many of the things that NASA came up with, that the space agency came up with, they actually came from Hindu texts. It's like people don't realize that a lot of the knowledge we actually have about space and the things that have been claimed about space, a lot of them actually come from the Hindu texts. And what I think is that NASA actually stole these Hindu texts, and I think they stole them, and I think that could be how they actually figured out that space exists. Now, the evidence I have for this is the fact that many of the things that NASA talks about regarding space actually were previously recorded in Hindu texts or Indian texts. Now, lines between like what's religious and not religious is not as clear in India, in ancient historical India, as it is in, say, Europe or America or Greece and Rome. But there is quite a bit of overlap because Hinduism is the religion of Hinduism is very closely tied to the Indian ethnicity, even though there are many non-Indians that practice Hinduism and Buddhism. For example, there was this like Indian astronomer who basically calculated the movement of the planets and like how long each planet took, and basically he calculated them very, very accurately to what NASA and other space agencies calculated them to be. Like, for example, let's say the moon took 14 days to go around the Earth. Well, this person said that it would take 13.5 days. Now, that's not actually what he said. I need to like kind of look more into this, but that is what he said. There's also an Indian mathematician who basically got these dreams from a Hindu goddess, and apparently these mathematical equations were the same mathematical equations as like the black holes. And if I remember correctly, Albert Einstein's theory of relativity may have been influenced by this guy, and I will put this name in when I'm editing the video. There was also an Indian who discovered the idea of pi, like before Pythagoras existed. And honestly, I've always thought that the name Pi kind of sounded like the Indian name, like Pi, like the life of Pi. Anyway, I always thought that Pi was an Indian name as opposed to a Greek name. So maybe the name Pi actually comes from the Indian name Pi, such as Life of Pi. So those are the things I have. Now, also there were Indian astronomers who believed the Earth was round before anyone believed in space, before Galileo existed, or Isaac Newton existed, or anyone such as that. So the idea that the Earth is flat, and that Hinduism supports the Earth being flat, that's not actually as accurate as people think, because if we go by these medieval interpretations, then the Indians apparently believed in space before anyone else did. It seems like the topic of whether the Earth was flat or round was a debate that's been going as old as time. And for my personal opinion on the Earth being flat and globe, I think that both of them are possible, but I personally believe it's not very important. Like, I don't think it's important whether or not space actually exists or not. What I think is important is the fact that we've been lied to about space, and the fact that I don't believe UFOs are actually what we're told they are. I believe that the UFOs are basically like what are called asuras in Hinduism and fallen angels in the Bible in the Book of Enoch. That's what I think that they are personally. Now, I do think that some aliens are actually real. I do think that aliens actually exist. I just don't believe that most UFOs we see are really aliens. I think that they're demons or fallen angels. Now, some of them could be good angels, i.e. suras and devas, but I think most of the ones we see are bad because they make us start religions. There's like cults of UFOs where it's like they apparently like sleep with the aliens. Well, that's what happened in the Book of Enoch, right? So it kind of seems like it's history repeating itself. So to go on to a last point that proves that they may have been stealing from the Hindu texts, there's actually like this Hindu text, I think it's the Bhagavata Purana, where it's like this man, this Hindu god, he like rained lightning or like Brahmastras, nuclear bombs on Mars in the past. And in that thing, Mars got destroyed, all the Asuras got destroyed, and all that kind of stuff. And like these Asuras, which are fallen angels, like these guys, they got destroyed, and their things got destroyed. And apparently there's like an iron mountain that's really big in Mars. There's an iron mountain called Olympus Mons. Now, like the way that these things line up with the descriptions of Mars is very interesting. Now, a big disclaimer is that something that could disprove his theory, this idea, there's two things that could disprove his theory. First thing is that the Greeks and Romans believed in planets as well as the Hindus, so maybe this isn't so unique. Maybe the NASA belief in space comes from Greco-Roman influence. But the second thing is that the Hare Krishna might be biased to space. They might be biased to believe in space as part of the whole space deception, so there's a chance that some of this information could be inaccurate due to the Hare Krishna trying to project their beliefs of space onto Hinduism. But I really think it's possible that Hinduism actually believes in space and other planets, because there are other Hindus who are not Hare Krishna who believe this. So basically, I think that there's two ways you could view this. Either one, the Hindus actually got it right about space, and NASA stole the information from the Hindus, or like they found evidence that corroborated with it, like small pieces of evidence. Basically, it's like they knew where to look, they had the right puzzle pieces, and they kind of put the jigsaw together, or they're just making it up and they're using all these Hindu texts as the basis for their like fictional fairy tale, depending on what you believe. Like to me, that's the only rational, scientific, logical way I can kind of see them coming up with the ideas about space, because like the thing is, I think it's very improbable that NASA would have actually known about these things in any other way, because it's like if you look at it like this, right? It's like they say that there's these planets thousands of miles away and that they're planets, but it's like they never sent any cameras over there, any rovers. And even if they did, it would take so long to get back there that the information they're getting wouldn't really be worth it. It takes a long time to even get like information to come back from Pluto to Earth, because it's like it takes years and years and years for the radio waves to go across back to Earth to transmit all this information and all that kind of stuff. And it also, it takes like years and years and years for light to come back to the Earth. It takes 8 minutes for the sun's light to come back to Earth. Well, if it takes like 8 minutes for the sun's light to come back to Earth, then how do you know what's millions of light years away? Like, how do you know that stuff? Like, how do you even know that? And it's like, also, it's like, why are they saying that like aliens exist in sci-fi? They say they don't exist in real life. That doesn't make sense. And by the way, like another thing that they stole from Hinduism is the sci-fi ideas of aliens and advanced technology. It's like in Hinduism, there's all these different races of alien beings. Like there's a race of beings who are like Wookiees called Venaras, which are basically like big monkey people who I personally think they're Bigfoot. And there's like this big like monkey race of people, and there's like all these other races, like these races of reptilians called Nagas in Hinduism. Well, it's like, well, wait a minute. If they're saying that means like the idea isn't really original. So what I want to talk about next is I want to talk about how else NASA might have got their knowledge about space. Now, I also want to talk about how Zecharia Sitchin and the ancient aliens and the Anunnaki people and the Anunnaki crowd like Eric von Däniken, Zecharia Sitchin, and all that kind of stuff might have actually got their knowledge. Now, before I continue on, something I forgot to say was that there's this prophetic dreamer who I follow on YouTube called End Times Dreams. His name is Mike Griffiths, and he is a New Zealander who has prophetic dreams about space. And I believe that he is actually hearing from God or some supernatural entity who is positive, because his dreams have came to pass. They actually talk about things which are unique and not fear-mongering. Like, he doesn't have dreams about the rapture. He actually has dreams about, like, space. He had a dream that after World War III in 2180, there's going to be a world war called World War IV. And he's also, like, managed to predict stuff about people that they couldn't possibly know. So he's got, like, divine insight or something. And he's also had this dream that we humans first visited Mars in the past, and we visited Mars in the past. And I believe that, like, even though he hasn't posted his dream, and I don't know, like, what the specific contents of his dream are, I believe that we visited Mars before the flood. Yes, I think the flood happened during the days of the Book of Enoch and Noah, and that means if we visited that back then, I think that Noah and Enoch probably visited Mars. Or we visited Mars before Adam and Eve were created. Like, I don't believe Adam and Eve were the only humans. I believe they were basically a group of human beings that got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and we're the descendants of these beings that got kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Like, I think that there were other people who got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, but that's like a topic for another video. But basically, there's a prophetic dreamer who's kind of confirmed it. Now, to get back to it, with NASA, here's how I think that they got Zecharia Sitchin and all these other people got their knowledge about space. Now, the way I think they basically got it was through fallen angels and demons. Now, if you think about it, right, there's no logical way that they could know that a black hole exists, because There's never been anyone who's seen a black hole or got sucked into a black hole or anything like that. People say that they can observe it, and yeah, they can observe it, but they might not actually know what that actually is. It's kind of like putting a telescope at the top of the sea and trying to see what's at the bottom of the sea by looking at the top of the sea. Or it's like being on a hill next to a shore and trying to like figure out what an anglerfish is doing just by looking at the top of the ocean. Like, you're not going to get that much knowledge about it. Like, you might know there's a fish under the ocean, but unless you go under the ocean, you can't reasonably observe what a fish is actually doing, right? So how do they know it? Well, I think that fallen angels and demons actually gave him this knowledge, and also I believe that they might have access to hidden Masonic texts that talk about space, and I also believe they might have knowledge from the pre-flood and from the Ark that the Nephilim might have survived, and I also think that they just got that kind of knowledge, right? Like, I think that's how they got the knowledge, because fallen angel part, well, in the book of Enoch, right, the fallen angels, they taught us, like, technology, they taught us how to make swords, weapons, cut roots, like, smoking weed, and they also taught us how to wear makeup. I don't think there's a problem with makeup, but they taught us how to wear makeup, and I believe they taught us how to actually wear drag queen makeup and how to dress up like clowns. I actually want to make a video about this, about how basically the fallen angels taught us how to be drag queen, because I believe that the idea of drag queens comes from the fallen angels in the book of Enoch, and it's like, I believe these angels that gave us all this knowledge, and it's like, the thing is, right, if they could have given us this knowledge back then, and there's fallen angels now who are trying to influence us and influence humanity and all that, those kind of things, right? And if Satan, who's a fallen angel, is trying to make a world government, if we go by the book of Revelation, then one of these angels be able to teach us secret, occult, hidden knowledge that we don't know, that, like, we don't know yet, but now we know, like, technology we're not ready for, or, like, technology that's not good for us. Like, if you think about it, right, it's not impossible that these watches, the same watches from back then, and like right now, they taught us how to make, like, I don't know, weapons. Like, how do we know that they didn't teach us how to make nuclear weapons or the iPhones? Because if we go by mainstream history, right, we didn't have any advanced technology up until the 1800s and 1700s, when suddenly we invented guns, steamboats, Tesla coils, cars, planes, guns, nukes, etc., right? Like, we didn't, like, get taught we didn't know any of that until now, so, like, what if they were the ones that taught us, right? And what if they're the ones who went to space and they taught us how to do this stuff? Because if you think about it, right, an angel, right, if they have as much power as we know, they can go all the way up to heaven and go to, like, different places on Earth. They can go to any place on Earth they want. Well, they could go to space, right? Like a fallen angel, right? I had a conversation with my friend, and apparently fallen angels, they can travel the speed of light. Well, if that's true, then that means a fallen angel, right? They can fly around in space because they don't need air to breathe. Well, that means they could go from Earth to Pluto in a second, and Pluto to Earth in 1 second. Or they could go to Uranus to Alpha Centauri, or go from one galaxy to another, and they would know what kind of things that they are around, because they're in charge of maintaining, like, the world and, like, the universe and stuff. So how do we know that these fallen angels, they don't actually, like, know what a black hole looks like, and, like, they don't know, like, how do we know they don't know, like, what Mars looks like? We don't. Because if space exists, then they've been to space. And if they've been to space, then they know what's in space, so they can reasonably tell us what's actually in space. Now, people will say that, the Hindu text could be inspired by fallen angels. Like, I don't think so, but it's not impossible, right? But, it's like these fallen angels, how do we know they couldn't have just talked to the people in NASA, told them what's actually in there? They told us how to make these things, like, told us how to make the Hadron Collider, how to make CERN, because nobody in the Middle Ages used Hadron Colliders or CERN. And if you look into it, right, some of the things that we've, like, kind of looked into, like, some of the things we've invented are actually kind of based off of alchemy, right? Some of the materials that are used in our, like, machines are based off of alchemy or occultism. Like, phone circuit boards, they look like occult sigils. Emojis are actually based off of sigils, and, like, our phones are made out of the same thing that alchemists would use in the Middle Ages, and alchemists are like occultists, like the Philosopher's Stone, like Harry Potter. Like, we got gold, alchemists use gold. They try to, like, convert things into gold using the Philosopher's Stone. So what if, like, it turns out that, these scientists, right, were alchemists? Because Isaac Newton was an alchemist. He was into alchemy. He was into occultism and black magic. And King James, who invented the British Empire, was a Freemason, occultist, and was into alchemy and black magic, and he was helped out by this guy called John Dee, who was into Enochian language. So basically, I think that it's not very far-fetched that they could have taught us these things. And for demons, yes, they could teach us stuff, because demons, they've been around, they can go across the earth, they can read books. If we do things for them, they can do things for us. And it's like they've been there from, the time of Shem, Ham, and Japheth at least until now, if not beforehand, from before the flood. So they could have taught us things. If we summon demons to help us do our things, then these demons, they can kind of help us do other things. Now, I know that sounds like kind of crazy and all that, especially if you're like not religious, but I think that this is like a possible reason. Like, I'm saying this for like people who believe in Christianity and biblical conspiracy. So I think that's another reason, another possible way. Like, something else that's very interesting is that there's this like Hindu woman I know on YouTube called Kundalini Yogini. And like Kundalini, this whole Kundalini idea is a Hindu idea. And she's like a Hindu woman. She's like a Western woman who converted to Hinduism, and an American woman who converted to Hinduism. And I remember her talking about one time in a video where she was talking about her experiences of meditating, or she was like doing astral projection of some kind, and she was like going into space. She was going past the planet Saturn, and she was being attacked by a demon in Saturn. And that kind of made me think that if that's true, then that means that demons could go to space. So demons might have been the ones who taught us about space. And since Darwinism is an idea that teaches us that we come from apes, teaching us we're worthless and all that stuff, teaching us we're not insignificant, that we're insignificant and all that kind of stuff. And if like Darwinism is like teaching us those kind of things, right? Darwinism is a religion that NASA promotes, and that's a religion that most people who are not religious believe in. But the idea of space and space travel comes from demons, and if like the ideas of space that NASA teaches leads to things such as like transhumanism, or if we're destined to become transhumanists because of NASA, and that idea comes from a demon who was in space who told us about space, then doesn't that mean that believing in space is a doctrine of demons? Doesn't that mean that space is a doctrine of demons? Because what is a doctrine? A doctrine is a belief. So a belief is like, that's believing in something. Well, a demon would tell us something about space we believe. And if a demon is the one telling us, then that's a doctrine of demons. So what NASA teaches is a doctrine of demons, because there's actually a very good chance that some of this knowledge could be demonic knowledge. Something else that's very interesting is that on Saturn's North Pole, there's like this hexagram on there, and people say that the hexagram is this kind of occult symbol, this fallen angel pagan symbol called the Star of Remphan. Basically, the Star of David on Israel's flag is not actually a star that David ever did, because David wasn't into symbols. So as the Star of Remphan, if NASA's got Saturn's got the Star of Remphan, then that kind of means that like there might be a reason why, I don't know, I just think that's an interesting kind of thing. I think that's an interesting detail. I don't think it's very related to this video, but it could be why like people have hexagrams, because it's kind of a way to worship these planets. I don't know. And it's kind of like something about the Star of Remphan, the hexagram, is that the hexagram is not actually like necessarily the Star of Remphan in X. It's more likely to be the Seal of Solomon. So this occult symbol we've came up with, that actually comes from Solomon. That's kind of like what I've said. That might sound schizo to some people, and this is definitely going to be edited quite a bit, but I want to kind of like pass on that knowledge. I think that NASA probably has got some of the knowledge of space from fallen angels and demons. And the reason why I think this is because it was founded by a Nazi, someone from Nazi Germany. And in Nazi Germany, those people were occultists. And the same Mike Griffiths person that I mentioned earlier in this video had a dream that implied that fallen angels control Nazi Germany. And Nazi Germany, they're under the earth apparently in Antarctica, all sorts of places. They led to Argentina, and they're like Illuminati Freemasons. So if a member of Nazi Germany who was an occultist related to Himmler went to America to found NASA with someone called Jack Parsons, who's another occultist, who followed Aleister Crowley, who's another occultist that dealt with demons and fallen angels, so how do we know that the top brass of NASA is not being ran by fallen angels and demons? So, like, how do we know we don't get that knowledge from the demons?